and welcome. Anyone who's been to Merchant City Yoga on a Sunday knows how much I love catching up with everyone over a cup of my freshly brewed spiced chai. These Sunday chai sessions really bring everyone together. A true celebration of friendship, community and connection. I want to try and capture some of that magic and share it with you at home. So I've invited some familiar faces from our MCY family to chat with me over a cuppa. I'm affectionately calling them the chai sessions. Pop the kettle on, get yourself comfy and come and join us. To be overly dramatic about it.
Not to be overly dramatic, but it's like, yeah, something like that disrupts you and makes you start to ask questions about your life and what it's all about. I was 21 and I started attending therapy for the first time, and my therapist introduced me to meditation like pretty quickly, and yeah, I felt some things beginning to shift and change in my life, and I just felt this deep peace that I never felt before. And suddenly the question of who am I and what am I about arose out of that. Yeah, there was some circumstances that changed in that kind of the dynamic where I wasn't able to afford continuing to go to therapy, and because of what was happening in me, the woman that I was working with, she basically felt that it was outside of her integrity to just like leave me to it, because I was really in the middle of a whole process.
Yeah.
So we ended up having this kind of like, it was like Karate Kid. I would go and like literally, she had this Zen garden and be like, you know, paint the fence and like wash the car
Amazing.
and cut the hedges, and then she'd teach me to meditate, and we did Reiki and things like that together. I think that went on for about a year, and I think this was actually during the referendum time, and like I think, you know, politically
So
all the
quite
ideas
big
about
kind of political and cultural shifts as well.
And then there's that question of freedom, and I think at that point I found a Krishnamurti book where he talks about freedom, and I think, you know, with things going the way it went and all this obsession over this idea of independence and freedom, I was just started to begin accessing ideas from Eastern philosophy in general, a whole range of different ideas about, you know, what is freedom. And then somehow or other I found myself in a yoga class. I think I've been to one yoga class. I think I had a bit of a sore back from lifting weights, and I was like, oh, I heard yoga's good for your back, and you know. And then I think it was Eddie Stern. You know that thing YouTube does where it just cycles through videos? I think I was just obsessively going down the rabbit hole with my new special interest, which was like anything spiritual, anything to do with yoga. And this thing came on, it was Deepak Chopra, Eddie Stern, and he was going out to support people, like youths who'd been incarcerated, going to hospitals.
Yeah, does some fantastic.
It's like work, absolutely mesmerising. And I had this huge epiphany, and I was like, I've never seen anybody that's inspired me so deeply. And I was like, I want to be like him. I want to learn what he does. I want to practice what he practices. And then I found this thing called Ashtanga Yoga. And I think, you know, I've been exploring the idea of faith and something that had to do with meditation, something with philosophy, something to do with the body. And, you know, I spent some time, you know, cherry picking and looking around for different things. And I think when I found Ashtanga, I was like, oh my God, it's like someone's presented this whole thing. It's a whole system of like ethics and principles and breathing and meditation and movement and all that stuff together. And there's this kind of inquiry part to it. And yeah, so it really suited me. And I think in the following week, I found myself in an Ashtanga yoga class. with Gilly Walsh actually.
Oh,
Gilly
yes,
Walsh,
yes.
in Paisley. And I was just like, wow, tell me everything about
'Cause she
yoga.
used to teach you as well.
Yeah. God, I used to probably
That was a
annoy the hell out
long
of her
time
with
ago.
all my questions.
Yeah.
But she actually encouraged me to go on a yoga teacher training, and found myself at Yoga Joe's sometime after, and he just really went head first into it, and really made that the centre of my life for a long time. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for being so honest about that and for sharing that, first of all. Thank you also from me personally for referencing The Karate Kid, one of my favourite movies.
Me too. I love it so much. It's like, it never gets old. Like,
No, it really doesn't. So many wonderful, wonderful lessons.
It's so good.
Anyway.
I still get a bit teary even, like, I watch Cobra Kai, and there's sometimes these scenes where you hear Mr. Miyagi's voice, or you see a float log.
Oh, no. I started to watch it and couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't carry on with Cobra Kai. Anyway, back to the enough of the nostalgia, back to the chat. So what do you think the most significant benefits of yoga are?
For me, like, it's been a whole variety of different things. Dealing with physical pain, I have an impingement in my hip. It's been helpful to learn different ways to move to alleviate pain. I used to really struggle with back pain all the time, like really, really bad back pain. And then it's changed in different ways over the years. Like, at one point, I was really in this, in the intellectual and philosophical sort of devotional aspect of it. But the more I've sort of ventured through different parts of the practice and stuff, at the moment, for me, the most important and biggest benefit, I think, is to be able to self-regulate, to be able to regulate my nervous system under stress. And like, I think there are times I meet people from the pre-yoga days or whatever, and they're like, what happened? You're so chilled out, you're so calm. And it's like, it's not like, I'm not always like that.
No.
I can be quite rowdy, as you know, but it's like, I don't go to those places anymore. It's just like, I've got these tools that help me to keep myself calm and centered and at peace. And like, shit happens. Life is chaotic and crazy, and it's like,
it surely is.
It's absolutely relentless sometimes. And I think, it's not about the postures, man. It's really not. Like, there's times, I was in Mysore with you last night, and I was like, by the way, can I just say, I love my modified Ashtanga practice. Like, I don't care. I'm not here for all that.
It's a guilty secret, isn't it?
It's like
how to adapt it.
I remember I used to push. And I was in a rush to try and be like, oh, I need to do all these postures. And then upon returning to that practice, having that thing, it's like, in my mind, like, I used to be able to do intermediate, I used to be able to do second series. I was doing all these pretzel things. And then actually, like, see, once I got over that, kind of almost grieving it a little bit, I'm in this place of like, today I will do half primary. I'll even skip vinyasas. Then I'll do some pranayama and lie down. I feel amazing. Who's here to police that experience? Nobody. It's just like, it feels great.
And that's exactly it, because the practice should nourish you and give you joy or whatever it is. You shouldn't feel less afterwards. But I think it's a lesson that we all have to learn ourselves, don't we? Like, we all come to something like a practice like Ashtanga, which is strong and it's dynamic and it's really impressive as well. Some of the postures, to watch them being done, really, really impressive. And like, we want to be able to do that, and we think it's about the more. But then I think you have to be practicing for a while to realise it's about the less.
Yeah.
Not the more. And it seems to be that's something we all need to figure out for ourselves. Somebody can tell you, but until you figure it out.
I was told hundreds
for
of
yourself.
times.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like,
we all
slow down.
Yeah.
People were always saying to me, like, grounding. I was like, what's that? What does grounding
what does
mean?
that mean?
It's just like, shut up, I'll do what I want. I'm throwing myself around the place, legs behind my head. It's like, see, now it's just like, it's the last thing I want to do. I'm like, I'm just not interested. But it's like, I was practicing this morning, I was thinking, if it gets to a place sometime soon where I'm ready for that again, cool. But, with working with this hip impingement, it's like, if I don't do Titipasana or whatever, I'm like, whatever, man. Like, this is here to nourish me. And if it's not, like, doing that, then you know.
Absolutely. So what was it then that inspired you to become a yoga teacher?
Yoga teacher. Yeah, I think that decision was made very, very quickly. I think there was something about, definitely Eddie Stern and that whole video series, Urban Yogis it's called.
Yes.
Watching how he went out into the community, it was just like, wow, that's really such a way to live, and you're really living for the benefit of other people and things like that. And I think prior to finding yoga, I was desperate to find a thing. I was in my early 20s and I was in recovery, and I was trying to maybe form a new way of living, even a new identity, to release how things had been for a while. And I was like, how can I find a meaningful way of living in the world where I'm actually in service in a way that doesn't totally deplete me, and like I'm quite happy. You know, they talk about it sometimes, like you see it, this idea of like something you're passionate about, something that you're fairly competent at, and something that's really beneficial to other people. And so for a while I was doing things like, you know, I was a fitness instructor and I was trying a couple of different things. And then when I was working in the gym, I realised it was never about fitness. I was at the squat rack and we were having these really spiritual conversations or philosophical debates about really interesting things. And I was like, yeah, people aren't really always, they're not always coming for squats. Sometimes they're coming for something else.
Yeah.
And I think really it's how I felt in yoga classes. I was like, man, I want to create a space to share that feeling with other people. And it's that thing, actually, I was listening to Radhanath Swami and Russell Simmons talking about this kind of path of yoga. And in one way, it was really interesting because like in those teachings, they have this idea that there is just this trajectory that people go on. And in that way that, you know, all self-mythologizing aside, it's just like, it's kind of how it is. You get this like higher taste of something, and we call that ruchi, and then you're kind of like, oh, you're so enamored by having that taste of this new experience. And then you get the compassion, that they call it karuna, and you're like, you feel that other people want to have, maybe would benefit from that, you want to share it, and you're like, hey, like, if you tried this, like, this is really, really good, like, have a go, try it. And then you go into seva, service. So it just felt like a natural evolution in one way, and I was like, there's nothing else that I can imagine doing with my life is like studying and practicing and devoting myself to yoga and trying to share it with people and finding ways that I can be out in community and, you know, working with people in recovery and working with, you know, all sorts of different groups and just, yeah, like taking those tools that I'm benefiting from immensely and finding a way to bring them into the lives of people who maybe ordinarily wouldn't try it, you know?
And to have discovered all of that and to have had the wherewithal to realise and act on all of that as well at a relatively young age as well.
Yeah, it wasn't easy.
I'm impressed. It took me a lot longer.
Yeah, it's not been a straight path, you know. It's like...
God damn it, Dan, you mean yoga's not linear?
It's not, I know it's not, but it's like...
Damn.
Sometimes people, like, when I'm working in recovery or whatever, there's sometimes this idea of like, oh, you know, how long have you been sober or whatever, and I'm like, well... There's been plenty of times over the years where either I've went back into problematic substance use, or I've just chosen to, like, you know, be like, actually, I'm just going to drink just now and I'm just going to see what that's like. And it's this idea of like, you know, that's been my experience, and that you're on that path and you sway to the left and you bash yourself and you sway to the right and you bash yourself, and eventually you're forced to just walk straight. And it's like, you know, I don't know if I'm walking straight yet, but it's like, you know, I feel that I'm really, you know, looking at yoga as this like remedial thing rather than some sort of like superficial luxury.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that I have something that I did spend that time really diving deep into, because, you know, I feel like I have something that feels like an emotional home and ethical center, and like a way that I'm aspiring to be in my life. And, you know, there's people I know, it's almost like they're just effortlessly in that place. They're just like really chill, really kind, really thoughtful. They don't seem to have a quick temper.
And
they just seem to be
so annoying.
Yeah. And they're like so positive, and I'm like, whoa, I have to work so hard to try and be there. So yeah, I don't know, it's like, I'm happy that I did really devote that time, and it's like, you know, it's that thing and finding what feels like center for you, what feels like that kind of place that feels like home for you. So you know, I don't have the most consistent devoted practice all the time, but I come back to it again and again and again because the way it makes me feel, it really raises me up and inspires me to try and be a better human and be less about myself and try and, I don't know, like do some good in the community a little bit, you know. It's
and helping support people. I love the analogy about bouncing between walls.
I've done that plenty in my life. It's like, oh, there's the bus stop, there's the bin, you know. And it's that
but
thing.
It's the balance, isn't it? You can't find balance without going out of balance.
Yeah.
So it talks to that analogy.
Yeah, I mean, on that, you know, the question of like freedom, that whole idea of like freedom.
The Mel Gibson freedom.
I'm going to really try hard to not talk about Braveheart. Like, you know, I quote that film so much. My friends got me a Braveheart script signed by Mel Gibson for my 30th birthday.
Were you being ironic or genuine?
Look, I mean, see, there's a whole list of problems with that film. I'm acutely aware of how terrible it is. I agree with every critique of that film, and I still love it. It's like so ingrained in my psyche from being a child and just watching it that much. And there's a lot of humour in it, you know. It's like, but anyway, all that aside, you know, that thing about freedom is I've lost myself where I was going to go with that, but it's that, one of the things I'm learning, right, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit recently, and actually I'm reading Eddie Stern's book just now, the
Lovely.
One Simple Thing. Yeah. And he nails it. He talks about this idea of most of the time what we think freedom is actually just then lends itself to like hedonism. It's like unlimited, I'll do what I want, when I want, where I want, there's no consequences, there's no limitations. And it's like, okay, you can try that. Maybe you're not mature enough to walk that path and like really, really hold your integrity whilst being so untamed.
Yeah, it might be fun for a while.
Yeah, but like life shows up and like really puts you in your place sometimes and goes, hey man, you're actually only human. There's other people, there's restrictions, there's and then so I've been thinking about this idea of I first heard about it in a chess book. It's this idea of a positive freedom. And it's the idea that is really quite aligned with a lot of the yogic thought, is that you actually attain a deeper kind of freedom through discipline, through restriction, through having these regulative principles or whatever. And that might sound boring or terrifying for some people, but what I'm finding, especially, you know, we talked about like neurodiversity and stuff like that. I had a diagnosis of ADHD, and I think that, you know, going back to the question of like, why is the practice so important to me? What's one of the biggest benefits is like the idea of those limitations actually support me to feel immensely free, and it's the freedom to be me, and it's the freedom to, you know, if I choose to abstain from certain things or whatever, and I choose to regulate and this important point is choice. Like, I actually get to choose my limitations.
Yes. Which
isn't always easy, to trust your own discernment, but like, to choose limitations that feel realistic, achievable, not too heavy on yourself and all that kind of thing. But what I'm finding, the more I deepen into that idea of like actually placing boundaries on some things and restrictions on some things and limiting some things, helps me to achieve more. It kind of liberates me from things where, you know, it can be a slippery slope into places I don't want to be. Or even, you know, musically, we talk about that in uni quite a lot, this idea that, you know, if someone gives you a brief and says, here's 3 ingredients, compose a piece of music by next Friday, you're like, oof, and you do it. And it's like, how far can you take that with these boundaries? So I'm appreciating that about yoga just now.
Rather
really
than just being able to do anything everywhere all the time.
Yeah. And I'm guilty of being someone who, because of that, there's that novelty driven mind and that special interest and that idea that, you know, attention deficit disorder. I often don't like the term. Someone else said this, I don't know if it was Gabor Mate, probably was, someone, could have been anybody really, but sorry, I can't reference the person, but it's like, it's probably more appropriate to say like attention regulation disorder, because I've got so much attention.
Yes.
Like I can hyper focus on a million things, and there's things that I'm able to do where I go into deep places of my mind, but it's about regulating it and sustaining that attention over a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, and choosing where to put it as well. I really like that.
Yeah. Like choosing the object of focus and actually being able to sustain prolonged attention on it, which is why yoga is immensely powerful for that, and
but can be really challenging as well.
So challenging.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to like, you find that you're like, well, with the Ashtanga sequence, like you get to Navasana, and there's that moment you're like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to do all these mad flying pretzel things, and oh god, and like that's always the moment where I just like I check out a little bit.
Yeah.
And sometimes I need a bit of encouragement, just like, right, what's happening? What are you doing here? Like,
just be with it.
Yeah, but
So I want to maybe take a few minutes to chat about your class. Like I said at the beginning, sharing a new class here at the studio. So I was wondering from your point of view, what are the main ingredients or components for your class, for your new class?
Okay, yes. So
and why?
Yoga Nidra is one of the main events in it. A lot of people find this quite unorthodox or unconventional, but we actually start the class with Yoga Nidra.
Nice.
People always expect that to be at the end.
Nice.
And the teacher that I had the most contact time with doing Yoga Nidra, Shora Hall, we had a whole lot of contact time doing that, like went quite deep into Yoga Nidra. And her idea was really that, if you're using that to bring people really deeply into their body, then moving, it's like a different kind of thing,
Yeah.
And I just had some really amazing experiences doing that, and now it just makes perfect sense to me to do it that way. I love doing that, and it might mean that the sequence is, I don't feel obliged to sort of, do really fancy, impressive things with sequencing. It's like, it's all about subtlety and sensitivity and like slow movement and even repetitive movement and watching the response of your mind and maybe the mind's tendency to either fly away somewhere else or like, how do you respond to repetition? Is it that, is the mind addicted to novelty, for example? What's the next posture? What's the next one? What's the next one? Like, what if you do something really simple, but then you come into a place of like sort of appreciation and reverence for like just how amazing it is that your body's doing that really cool thing. You're like, oh, there's all these things moving and things switching on and things moving in a different way.
It's miraculous.
It's like the way you're doing Yoga Nidra.
Yeah.
You're like, right brain, left brain, blah, blah, blah. And you're in this place and you're like connecting with your breath and you go, okay, here's the beginning of the movement. Now the movement's happening, So sequencing wise, I'm not doing anything really fancy. It is that thing of like deep listening, deep feeling, and just, taking it really slowly. There's sometimes a bit of pranayama in there, maybe we'll do that at the end of the practice. Sometimes maybe end with a short kind of sitting practice after Shavasana. But yeah, that's it really. It's really like as far, like for me, it's as far the opposite way from Ashtanga as I can maybe imagine. In terms of the experience I had from years of practicing that, it's like this totally other thing of, I don't know, it kind of feels like lie down, give yourself a cuddle and
I could maybe argue that might go full circle though.
Maybe, yeah.
And bring that back to the Ashtanga practice, but that might be a whole other...
Yeah, maybe.
Very biased from my point of view conversation.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we take it, the way I'm teaching just now is sometimes we do take it into like a standing sequence but again, it's using familiar, like repetitive forms that we find in any popular yoga class, but done with repetition, really slow pace, and then maybe longer holds. That was a thing that I was really inspired by Nikki Myers from Y12SR. That's one of the things that she's really into.
Right.
And she was speaking about the way those movement patterns work on the body and the brain, and it's really quite interesting. And then the long holds, it's like you're really working with the psychology as well, and I just found that really interesting. But then normally what we'll do is there may be a series of movements and stuff like that, and then coming back into a still position to then go back to this idea of regulation and breathing and just always bringing it back to that. And because from experience, that's actually what I really benefit from.
Yes.
Is I can sit there and do all these kind of weird and wonderful postures and then my mind flies away somewhere. But if I'm invited to be like, hit pause, feel your body in space, there's lots of sensory cues like that, and just being present with your breath, it brings you back and starting again regularly with that pause and then moving.
Lovely. I love the idea of starting with Nidra, sort of turning what might be called kind of modern thinking on its head a little bit. I do suspect I might struggle to get up after yoga nidra. That's why I do mine at the end. It's just like, let's get the moving done so that I can just lie down and relax. But I can really see how that would completely change your experience of a movement-based practice, like completely different and completely change the focus as well. Thank you very much. So, going to wrap up and let you go.
Cool.
Back out into this beautiful sunshiny weather. But maybe one last question comes to mind, and that is, what's one thing that you think might surprise people about you?
About me?
Yeah.
I don't know. Actually, do you know, the first thing that comes to my mind is that I'm actually quite shy. Because, like, people always think I'm really confident and, like, really chatty and whatever, and, like, but yeah, I'm actually quite shy. I usually say that I'm like, you know, when you see a duck on the water, it's like they're there on the water, but then underneath their legs are going like mad. So I don't know, I think that often surprises people because, you know, friends over the years or people I've been in different communities with and things like that, you know, I may reveal things about myself once in a while and they go, what? Shut up, really? Because they just think I'm, I don't know, effortlessly calm and, I don't know, confident or whatever, but it's usually not the case. I'm actually quite shy.
It's cool, isn't it? We all have many different sides. Thank you so much for taking the time out to chat today. Maybe next time you will have a proper cuppa.
This is grand.
Thanks, Dan.
Cheers. I almost feel like I want to do like a Braveheart quote now.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our chat. If you've got any questions, you can email me or find us on social media. I'll see you here next time.